Dentistry and General Radio Network presents
the Independent Dental Practice Podcast with Dr. Sonny Spera. In this episode,
my guest, Dr. Michael Abernathy, an absolute treasure to the dental profession. He gets more satisfaction out of helping people than most people that I know. And he's going to share a ton of jewels, nuggets, and he's going to back that up and put a lot of information on the show notes. He's got 2 different books. They're marketing books, another book. He's got a form that he wants you all to have, and then he's got a whole bunch of other materials that, by all means, please download and look it over. Just one of my favorite episodes I've ever done. First show, we're going to talk about Mike's path, how he got where he did, and his path to success, how he defined it, how he got there. Some of the things that he does now are a reflection on what he did then. So you'll really enjoy that. Part 2, we're going to go a little bit deeper into his business model, how he works with partners, which he's still doing to this day. And he goes and buys in practices, and he brings in a doctor, and they're brought in as a partner. And it's all spelled out for him right away, right immediately when they start. And it just makes sense. And I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned a ton. As always, please, if you like the podcast, share it with your friends. Click like, subscribe. If you don't like it, please contact me. I would appreciate the feedback. sonnyspera@gmail.com or independentdentalpractice@gmail.com, or you can hit my cell phone, 607-624-2962. Hope you guys enjoy these shows.
The Do's and Don'ts of Running a Successful Practice, Part 1. Dr. Sonny Spera interviews Dr. Michael Abernathy.
Welcome to the Independent Dental Practice Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spera. Today, I have a very distinguished guest who I have been after to get on, and we just never connected. So I reached out to him this morning. He's like, yeah, name a time or place. So I was like, how about today? Yeah, sure. So that's my kind of guy. So Dr. Michael Abernathy, I'm sure many of you have heard or seen some of his writing, some of his advice. He has been all over different parts of dentistry. He is a wealth of knowledge, and we're going to try to bug him to get as much information as we can. Let me give you a little bit of his background first. And he is a Texas guy at heart, too. Austin College, undergrad, 1972 graduate. Baylor College of Dentistry, 1975. And professional experience. Okay. Family Cosmetic Dentistry of North Texas, McKinney-Dentist.com for 37 years. 3 associates who became partners. 12 hygienists, over $11 million a year in collections, 52% overhead. Let me repeat that. $11 million in collections, 52% overhead. Average 250 to 300 new patients per month. Total mixture of fee-for-service and PPO, so he covers both ranges. Okay, average of 15 to 20% growth for a year for 39 years. Owner partner in 43 practices throughout the United States. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Abernathy. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me.
I can't wait. I met Mike at Nathan. Nathan Ho had I think it was his Win-Win Dental Summit. It was in Irvington. And he always talked about you. I think you're a big mentor for him. And he'll always quote or put down maybe your post for the day or some real nugget of knowledge about, maybe it's about new patients. The one thing I remember was you talked about writing a letter or a little handwritten note to a new patient. And I think the one example that you talked about, you had a patient and they had a baseball uniform on. You were like, hey, you got a game? Where is it? And then you show up at the kid's baseball game. And it's these lifelong nuggets of connections, really, that I think create just a great relationship. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I got to know more about how you got into dentistry and your path to where you are now. So fill me in.
I was a lab technician in high school.
Okay.
By the time I was in college, I was a master ceramist for Tanaka. And then I paid my way through dental school doing lab work for my professors.
How did you have the inclination to do that?
I wanted to make some money when I was a lab technician. It's only like I mowed lawns like everybody else and washed windows, but someone gave me a job pouring up models and then started doing dentures, and then I started waxing up gold work, and then did porcelain all the way through college. And I like working with my hands. But even that exposure, 9 years before I hit dental school, it didn't prepare you for a career in dentistry. It made the technical stuff easy. In the patient's mouth was pretty easy because I've been doing it for so long. But anyway,
Okay.
it was fun. It was easy. And I didn't want to die poor. And I am the only male in my family in 7 generations that's not an attorney. I've just started my 76th year. So I'm a lot closer to that used before date than born on date. I look at dentistry perhaps a little bit differently than a lot of doctors I talk to. So
Did you always have an entrepreneurial spirit?
that's a pretty long word. I don't know that I could even spell it, but I probably would not have defined it the way they might define it.
Gotcha. Okay. So you said so you had various jobs until you got into the thing. So talk about when you finished dental school, what did you do? What did you get into?
At Baylor, they tried a 3-year program. So no vacations, no days off. You got Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, but we were going to finish on the same day that the class ahead of us finished.
Wow.
So I think
Okay.
that's the thing. They had their graduation on, I may have this off, Saturday, and ours was Sunday. And I was married in Indiana on Saturday, and my honeymoon was in the front seat of a car driving back to my graduation on Sunday morning, and I barely made it. So I, like everybody, I worked an associateship. I got fired from it because the patients wanted to see me, and there weren't enough patients in the practice. That lasted about a year. Did another associateship because the doctor in McKinney went back to my hometown. Okay. And this other doctor was in his 80s and was going to retire, but because I did his lab work and I did my lab work and did the patients, he didn't retire. And so finally, I just opened a practice across the street, which was an abandoned 7-Eleven store.
Okay.
Paid $40,000 for it. And then it was crazy. It was just like everybody else. You just start off trying to serve your patients and do the best dentistry you can, and went from 1 op to 6, and then opened another office with 10 ops. And then it continued to grow. It wasn't by plan. It wasn't like I knew that I would end up having a bunch of new patients come to me. I was just trying to take care of the patients that did come to me.
Now, the first thing you made an interesting statement. The patients all wanted to see you. What's your secret sauce? What did you think it was?
Probably, I'm not real good socially, but I knew that if I were going to do well, the people that do well have great people skills. And while it's not natural for me, I knew I'd have to take that on. I'm exhausted at the end of the day if I see patients all day because I'm talking the whole time. I'm finding out about their families, and I remember those things. I had convenient hours. No one else did. 1975, they allowed us to market. I put one piece in the newspaper, and I drew the graphics. And that next month, we had a little over 200 new patients show up. I got, it was 5 letters from the state board the first year because the doctors in town, there were only 5 of us, filed a complaint that I was marketing, which was illegal, and it was all the way. But so by the time I'd practiced for 4 or 5 years, I had a lot of arrows in my back. And so interesting. I spent my first year, I bumped into a guy named Bubby Yates in Utah, and I was sitting at the back of a seminar, and I think it was a Gordon Christensen seminar on materials and stuff. And I'm taking all these notes, and this guy wasn't taking any notes. And I went, why aren't you taking any notes? And he goes, I know this stuff. And come to find out, he did $1 million that year. Now, Bob Lavoie wrote a book in 1975 called The $100,000 Practice.
Yeah.
Now, this doesn't sound great to a bunch of people that are young, but $100,000 practice was probably double, triple what a normal dentist did in a year in 1975. And I had just met a guy that did $1 million a year. And there was no dental economics. There was no internet. There were no dental material. There was nothing out there that would tell you that people existed like that. So I was just bold enough to say, can I visit? He said, yes. And I said, I'll be there Monday. I watched him work, and he wasn't any better looking than I was. His building wasn't any nicer. His staff wasn't any better. His dentistry certainly wasn't as good as mine. And I'm going, I left not knowing anything more than before I got there. But I visited 18 practices. They all knew each other. And I came back. And then my second year in practice, I did $1 million in 1976. And it was really more up here than it was in my hands or that business knowledge, I figured that I can learn this. I have the desire. I'm self-motivated. I'm a constant student. I can make this happen. Not that was a good goal at that point. It was just a goal. And I don't look at money being really the goal you should have. I look at money as a way to quantify the amount of service that we offer our patients. But it worked out pretty well.
So I'm getting the real strong vibe that you are committed to perpetual learning and improvement.
Absolutely. I went back and from 1978 through my career practicing every day, we averaged $150,000 a year on continuing education. Now, that did include my staff too. It wasn't just classes for me. Also, you kind of awaken to the fact that you're not going to get across the finish line unless people are following you. And so I remember listening to cassette tapes by Earl Nightingale, and we all did that. I would feed my brain, take my 8-track out, put the cassette player, take that out, put the DVDs, take that out, and now you're downloading it. But it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. I tried to feed myself, knowing that I wasn't really good at this, all the positive things I could. And I took and stole and gathered and things that tended to work. I also realized that there really was no learning without application. And so it wasn't much enough for me to learn it or hear it and then go, okay, I've got that in my quiver. No, I had to take it and then actually act on it. And I see that to be a real challenge for some younger dentist. You learn these life lessons hard. I'm probably the guy that put his hand on a hot stove and went, man, that really hurt. So I tried the side of my hand, the back of my hand, my thumb, my fingers, and then finally stopped putting it on the stove. So I got really good at failing quicker and quicker so I could get across the line.
By definition, Thomas Edison, I never failed. I had 99 attempts, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, and it's funny you said that because I just interviewed Jennifer D. St. George, and she talked very strongly about, okay, we can have a seminar, we can have a instructional time here, but very few are going to implement this. And I learned that my first 1 or 2 years in practice. I just went and I saw our good mutual friend Jeffrey Hughes. I just saw him speak in Boston, and I'm bringing 2 or 3 things back that I've already implemented. I'm like, oh, these are like game changers, and I've been at it for 35 years, so why not? I think that's the fun part. That's the exciting part.
And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you can find the right mentor. I do find, though, that it has changed from when you first started practice till now. At that time, in the late 70s, people weren't being paid to speak. They spoke to help. And I've realized that there must be a big business in this, because it seems like the speakers that are telling you something you want to hear have something to sell you.
Well, yeah, I think it's because of the nature of who's sponsoring, who's paying the freight, and the sponsor.
It could be. Yeah, I mean, it could be. But I'm thinking more of on social media platforms that allow people to sell themselves, which is fine. But I feel much better if somebody will tell me what I really need than what I want to hear. They're really trying to help me rather than sell me something. And I'm willing to buy stuff. I can't tell you, as a lab technician, every one of my practices have lab techs. And they had lab techs in 1970s and 80s that were doing internal staining and layered porcelain, empress crowns, and hand laying. Some of the first all porcelain deals, we had to remove a platinum foil from the inside of it.
I remember that.
So it wasn't that I wasn't a quick adapter, but I got burned a lot. It was just fortunate that I was making enough money that I could take the hit.
Okay, so you've had some great mentors, you've had some great role models, we'll call them as well. And that allows you to accelerate your practice. I think if we can put that in today's terms, back then, when you're doing $1 million, when the expectation's $100,000 as a good practice, yeah. I think we're talking now that would be a $20 million solo practice.
I've never seen one that large unless you had multiple offices, but yeah.
But I'm saying if it's $2 million, if your goal, let's say $1 million. If it's $1 million, then 10 million's the number now, because it's 10x what it was. So you just try to swallow that. There was, like I was trying to tell you, there was something out there today about that. But so let's go on with, so now you're cooking along, right?
Sure.
You're like, things are happening. You've hit a number, like you said, it's really more of a statistical gauge. And then what happens? Where do you go from there?
Maybe I shouldn't bring this up, but 5 years after I got married, I went through a divorce. She was a buyer for Neiman Marcus. She'd be gone 2 or 3 weeks out of the month, and I was working hard to make the practice work and getting fired as associate a couple of times and opening my own practice, and I didn't even know we were having a problem. So we all have stories, right? Things don't go smoothly. I think that the people that do well, they keep getting back up. And even though I was doing well in the practice, my life was coming apart. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. But you're all in at your practice. If you're going to be at that level, that takes a certain amount of commitment inside and outside the office. And
Right.
and it comes at a certain cost or a certain expense. So where did you go from there? You said you found God, so I'm sure that's a very strong influence in your life, because I remember asking you, how's the day going? Every day's going great.
Yeah.
That's the antithesis of what you just described. Did you ever take a pause in your dental practice with this personal scenario? Was there ever a time where you took we'll call it a leave of absence?
No.
That was your concept.
No, I can't remember. It's probably my personality. I can't ever remember taking a day off because I was sick, ever. I'd show up sick, work on a patient, go throw up, and come right back out.
Yeah, I tell you a lot. I'm not very fine. I missed one day because I had hurt my back and I couldn't move. And I'll never forget that, because that's that one day in 35 years. So I hear you. It's get on the back on the horse. So your practice, we'll call it, probably has a steadying influence. Did you seek counseling or help?
I did. And it's funny because it seemed like the people like a psychologist, psychiatrist, and going through this, but some other things happened too in my life. That I went to a military school. Roger Staubach was the quarterback for a high school. It was a time where you were getting drafted.
Yeah.
I worked for the State Department every vacation and stuff. I did a bunch of stuff so it all piled up, and that was the point at which it was the lowest, and it was all coming back up. It was weird though. The psychiatrist had already been married and divorced 3 times. It was like going to a fat guy for diet advice.
Or going to a skinny guy how to lift weight.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going, not that they couldn't do it, but I like what Lee Trevino said one time when he was talking about, they were talking about all of the golf players getting coaches and stuff like that. And he goes, I'm not going to go ask some little 20-year-old snot-nosed guy that's never been on the playoff round of the Masters what I should be doing. So it was harder to find mentors, and I'm always looking for mentors. I also, about that time, started looking at dentistry, because you remember how this was. It was almost like it was a calling, that it was this, I'm not demeaning it, but it was just like there was this, I don't know, I started figuring out that it really was just a small consumer-driven business. It was like our client, we had this one side where we had to be mechanically correct, and then we had to have an education so we could be a doctor, and then all these things. But I really started noticing that the only person that gets to vote on whether this is a good or bad practice from the perspective of it growing were my clients. And so I went out, bought a Dairy Queen, went to Nordstrom's training for their salespeople. I started looking in different places and then denticizing other consumer-driven businesses so that we could figure out how I could, denticize, put it in play in my own practice. That made a big difference because it created a culture based around serving. And I constantly update that. And I don't think doctors pay enough attention to the fact that simply it's a consumer-driven business where people vote with their feet and their billfold. So,
very true. And I think I want to ask you about the Dairy Queen, because I know that Howard Ferran talked a lot, and that's one of the things he talks about in his business strategy and his MBA, all that kind of stuff. Is think of your office as he uses McDonald's a lot. So when you get into, and he comes from a background where his dad owned a Sonic, and so that he was involved in the world of franchises. Okay. Their dinner conversation was demographics, car counts, et cetera, et cetera. So when you get the Dairy Queen, what are some of the things that you take out of that?
It's probably different now than it was then. Consistency was something, for example, in a McDonald's, the materials, the food in its frozen condition come from the same location. It goes into the same type of fryer. It has a timer. You can't oversalt it. It's only salted that much. So the systems, protocols, and consistency of a result, certainly I would never argue that McDonald's has great food. It has consistent food.
Right.
And then people vote whether they want to eat there or not. I learned that early on, and that was interesting because I wasn't winging it. There was a better way of doing something without me reinventing the wheel. But now this is a little off topic, but the main thing I learned is Dairy Queen. I'd never seen this before, and I had multiple hygienists in my office in the 70s. Now, the state law said I couldn't have more than 2 full-time hygienists. And then my little brother said, that's okay, hire as many as you want. The state and federal agencies define full-time as 40 hours. Your full-time is 32 hours a week. Said you can have 50 hygienists you want. So I would use my little brother to challenge the state board on the stuff. So same thing with doctors. And as I started getting doctors, I started to see them coming and going. Usually lasted about 15 to 24 months and they'd move on. Because prior to 2002, 98% of all the dentists that went to dental school became owners. Now it's less than 50% of the graduates become owners. In Dairy Queen, they allowed the manager to own 25% of the Dairy Queen. And so now, instead of having an employee, the company, the franchise, had a partner in their deal. And a lot of the stress and things that we deal with goes away when they have an ownership mentality. So they're sharing in the profits. And so I carried that into my own practice and started sharing the profits with my team. Now, I know they call it bonuses, but it's not. It was purely profit sharing. And when I sold that main practice in McKinney, the average profit sharing monthly was a little over $3,000 per employee. And that's with a 52% overhead. So again, I mean, it's amazing how we have things that happen to us in our past, and it's a lesson learned, but we don't remember it until you come up with a challenge. You go, oh, wow. You go back and look and say, there's the answer. All you do is denticize it.
Okay. Now, I'm going to see if I can tie these two together. Tell me if I'm way off. Marketing. So
Yes.
you said you started the marketing. Now, with the Dairy Queen, there's a marketing budget, right? There's a line item for marketing, right? Did you adapt that or say, hey, how does that relate to my W?
Yeah, no one marketed back then. But I figured out that marketing wasn't, I'm modernizing it. It wasn't Google Clips or Facebook or social media. It was really your ability to tell a story that caused the person reading it to act on that story. And so marketing's pretty easy. And I'm more than happy to send a digital book to you. You can send it. I don't want the email addresses of anybody, but I'll send you a book on marketing that I've written that has no digital marketing in it. It was on purpose because these kind of strategies will get you 30 to 200 new patients a month more than you're getting if you really are looking for patients. Now, the trouble with marketing is you're telling a story. If you don't, when they come in, it just gets you one FaceTime with them. If you can't impress them, you're going to lose them. And so I see doctors that don't market, and the truth today in a consumer-driven business is you cannot not market. Even not marketing is marketing. It tells the consumer something. So anyway.
Okay, so you've shared that with me, right? Is that what you sent to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I've
got a lot of stuff I can share to anybody. So
how about I put that in the show notes, and anybody wants it, they can get it from there.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Great.
Okay. All right.
Yes, absolutely.
So did you put a certain number aside, like getting back to that? Did you say, I'm going to 1%, I'm going to put it?
Yeah. Now, you've got to remember, I didn't have anything to benchmark against. I was the moving target, and it was all new. But I did study what corporations spent as a percentage of their collections, and I started noticing that what I was spending for me to grow 15 to 20% a year was approaching that percentage of my collections. And so I got comfortable with that number. Now, obviously, let's say, for example, you felt like you needed to spend 4 or 5% of what you collected. Okay, let's say that was $5,000 a month. I'm not saying I spent $5,000 a month without benchmark that against the results I got. And so if I wasn't getting at least a 3-to-1 type of return on my money, I tended to go through a lot of trial and error to make sure I was getting that and more. And back then it was easier to get more, like sometimes 10 times what you spent.
Think about what you said earlier, right? You said, but what you said earlier, you have no problem burning your hand on this side, and then that's
right.
So exactly. No problem. You know what? Swing and a miss. You get 8 strikes rather than the person gets 3 strikes.
And you never make the shot you don't take.
100%.
Yeah.
I think so many people are afraid of that and are hesitant to do it because maybe in the past it didn't work. You remember those patients that came in that were difficult as opposed to the 90% that were really pleasant. It's just part of our nature. But I think when you're looking at business, and I think you seem to have figured it out early enough to say, this is a business component and this is a people component. I need to try to get the business to help me with the people.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, no, that's great. And it's a team effort. I figured out there was no way that I could be the little ray of sunshine and the cheerleader and the player and the coach and the water boy in my practice. And so it's assembling that group of people that believe so strongly in that vision. And you give them a game, you show them what it takes to score, you reward them for that. I use their advice. I can't tell you all the times that one of my employees came up with an idea that it was so simple, but it was brilliant, and I couldn't think of it. I didn't think of it. And so I'm fine not being the smartest guy in the room.
But you got to hire people that can be. So now that begs the question.
Yeah.
What do you look for when you're hiring?
I'm glad you asked. No, we haven't spoken at all before this.
I'm sorry, but that was an easy segue.
Yeah, I know. No, this is great. It's because if someone thinks they're a good leader or a good boss, and you look over your shoulder, there's nobody there, then you're just taking a walk.
100%.
So it's one of those things where you're going, I got better as a leader when I realized that when I walked in and it was game time every morning, I was not any more important than the newest hire I hired. And so the way I hired people is they had to have incredible people skills because I did not. Okay. It was like, I want somebody to come in and compliment me, but I also want them to compensate for me.
You said that early on, you were uncomfortable with those things.
Yeah, I still am. Yeah, I still am.
You don't strike me as shy, but I get it. I get what you're saying. So you have to put in your sphere, right?
Yes.
Working in those people who have complementary skills.
So I hired people now I would say that I was a really good student of most of the components in my practice. I don't see that very often anymore. But you have to understand that we didn't have marketing, then we didn't have hygienists, then we did. We didn't have associates, then we did. We didn't have computers, then we did. And so you were always learning these things and trying to implement them. But one, they're incredible people skills. Secondly, they're internally motivated. They either walk through the door that way or they don't, and you can't train this. Anything else I could train.
So how do you find out in the course of an invitation or a conversation or an interview, we'll call it, how do you find out if they are? What are some things to look for?
Let me send you the template I use in doing job interviews, along with the interpretation of the job interview, so that you can actually, nowadays, when you interview people, they're going to tell you what you want to hear.
Right.
Okay. And so you cannot get by these. I really have studied this and tried it and failed and done it again. And so I have got questions for front desk assistants, hygienists, associate doctors, office managers, the interpretation of. Be glad to send it to you. It's just going to end up getting thrown away when I die. And why would you have to reinvent the wheel to do this? So again, these were all ideas that have evolved through 40 or 50 years of this. And I took it from people that were much wiser than I was. You can denticize it and put it in a format that you're going, wow, this really works. And I took a very consistent way of interviewing them. But it's funny, if you run into a person and you hire them and it doesn't work out, because it happens, then you're a little bit wiser about the type of person you want to take that person's place, because you don't want to reproduce a bad result. And so I had some bad results. I also decided that since we own the practice, my team then made the final decisions on any hire we made. Okay, I find somebody, I interview them, then they interview them, and I've got, currently 60 doctors that are employees that will be owners. But even the associates that became owners in all the practices I had, the staff ultimately went thumbs up or thumbs down. Now, by doing that, you have the right type of person. If I get the team behind them and they say, this is the person, now they're going to make sure that person succeeds. So the onboarding process of bringing someone in and getting them into the culture and stuff, I talk to doctors that say, yeah, I know I hired this person and they're doing this, and she's been here 9 months, 12 months, and she's really not getting it. It generally took us 2 to 3 weeks and they were perfect. I don't understand, but it was very systematic, and I'd be glad to give you all that data, and maybe somebody will be interested in trying it.
Great stuff. That's great stuff.
Can I mention something you shouldn't do?
Please do. That's probably as important as the other.
Don't hire anybody you can't fire. Okay.
like,
Now, I mean,
like a relative?
yeah, like a relative. Or don't get your best friend to work there. Or you had 2 associates forming your own practice. It generally doesn't work out well. It's certainly worse than the average of people getting married. That's a 52% failure rate. And then I never hire anybody who's best friends with anybody else in my office. And that's real hard not to do sometimes. But if you have to let one of them go, you lose 2 of them. I never keep anybody that makes my life miserable. Sorry, I don't care what position they're in. And so it's just...
So they don't. So let's say you got just take a dynamic hygienist. She says, hey, Doc,
Yep.
I have a friend of mine. She's great. And then she gives you a high recommendation, and you think a lot of this person. You don't entertain that conversation. Basically, a really solid, phenomenal employee gives you a name of a person that...
Oh, yeah, no, they did. They have. One of the doctors that became an owner was given to me. And then I said, so how do you know him? He says, I babysat him when he was little, and I followed him. He's really a great person, really, again, self-motivated. He came from nothing. And that particular doctor, when we hired him, he was the youngest doctor we ever hired, like right out of dental school. And he did well. Like within 2 or 3 months, he was doing $80,000 a month. And he'd come to me and go, he was driving some beater car. And he said, you think I could buy a house in McKinney? And he was living 30 miles away with his parents. I said, no, live with your parents for a year or something. And he said, and then I remember one time he came in, he says, without even him telling me, I said, you want to buy a car, right? And he goes, yeah, my beater died. And I said, why don't you just buy another beater? And he said, it's a Porsche. And he goes, yeah. And he said, but it's used. It's only got 5,000 miles on it. And I can get it for $20,000 less. And I said, can you write a check for it? And he goes, yeah. And I said, go do it. Fine. Whatever you want to do. But it was funny. Even after I sold that practice, my wife gave a party for our staff every year. Now, I was never invited. Okay. But all the staff were. And so they got to be very close. But I remember speaking and coming home on a Friday night. And so I'm driving up to my house. They've got all these cars, and I go inside, and it's my staff. Okay, now I sold that practice, and then that practice got sold to Heartland. But they still have these get-togethers, and they eat and stuff like that. I walk outside, and we have a patio, and they were all talking. He said, when you were here, when you were there, it was different. It was our practice. But now it's just about the money. And we were joking about it. And one of the girls said, do you know that your CPA drafted trusts for all of us, and that none of us never told our husbands, and most of them, over half of them have been divorced, never told them that we got a bonus check from you. So that money paid for our kids to go to college.
That was on the sale of the practice, was that? Is that what that was?
Yeah. I sold that practice to, I had 2 partners. They found the buyer, and they did really well. It really took off. But again, it was that camaraderie with the team that made a big difference for me. And looking back, you look at things differently. So anyway.
I really appreciate you sharing all the information. Part 2, we're going to go a little bit deeper into his business model, how he works with partners, which he's still doing to this day. Hope you guys enjoy these shows. I've loved doing them. Have a great day.
This has been a production of Dentistry in General Radio Network. Visit our website, dentistryingeneral.com, to join engaging clinical and business conversations, explore our dental podcasts, and stay updated on our upcoming live events.